Okay, hello all. This is Crow from Global Music Club, and I think you're getting used to our 10 minutes Caws by now. We started last Monday with a topic every day, and Saturdays is gonna be in Goth We Trust. So I don't think you need any explanation about what we're going to talk about every Saturday, 9 p.m. UK, 4 p.m. EST, USA. So, for our first session, we have a very special guest, and I have introduced him in the post already. And I'm going to pass the screen on to Mr. Trevor Bramford. Hi there, Trevor.
Hi, how are you doing?
How you doing? I'm good. How's
Good,
things
good,
over
good.
there?
I imagine it's pretty the same as where you are, really. Things are quiet. People are wondering about the future, if there is one, and stuff like that. But yeah, okay, really.
Yeah. I would just like to remember our viewers that we did an interview recently about your band, Chaos Bleak.
Chaos Bleak, yeah.
Yeah. And how's that going? Just very quickly.
Well, Chaos Bleak was doing really, really well. We were kind of had an EP out called Transcendental Chaos, and we had quite a few dates booked. And we had festivals right up till about December booked and everything, and then everything just stopped because of the virus. So at the moment, I've just had a meeting with my band members tonight about what we're doing next. And to answer that question, what we are doing next is releasing a single on the 25th of May called Empty Morning, and we're going to be recording a promo video for it, which is going to be recorded different sections in our houses, and I'm going to collate that everything and put them into a promotional video, which like a performance we've already done, and we're going to put it together as a whole. And the idea is it's kind of reflecting on the idea of performance, and also the idea of social isolation and lockdown. The actual song is an ecclesiastical bent to it, so it's all to do with the idea of reflection and whatever. So and then there's going to be another EP, so that's what we're doing. So yeah.
Cool. I asked you today to come here not because of Chaos Bleak, but Chaos Bleak is within the topic of Goth, of course, because it's a Goth band, but because you have studied the history and all the context around Goth culture, and with your masters and doing the PhD right now. So I think one of the first things in these sessions would kind of be nice to talk about the myth of Goth and the many misconceptions there are that it's enough of I'm gonna wear some black clothes and I'm Goth all of a sudden.
So when you say Crow, when you say myth, what exactly are you referring to precisely?
Because sometimes when I mention Goth and people ask me, so is that all about wearing black? And they don't realize that there's a whole culture and a way of life behind it. So
yeah, well, that's right. I mean, obviously, to be fair, the internet is full of mainly on news groups about talking about what is goth and what is not goth. Is emo goth, and can you like to wear black clothes and have skull pendants, but not like the music and still be goth? And it's like this raging row about all of this. But quite simply, when it comes down to it, what goth culture is can be kind of reduced down to a fairly straightforward explanation. And what it really comes down to is that it is musical based. The actual glue that holds the entire scene together is musical and music in structure, but it's also to do with and it's a real cliche to say this, but a love of the dark side. Most people I know in the Gothic scene, we kind of grew up. I mean, obviously I'm English and I grew up in England, and I grew up watching, sneaking downstairs late at night to watch horror films on a Friday night, the Hammer horror films and stuff like that. And I also grew up with a lot of American comics, which is unusual in England at that time. We're talking about the early 70s. And I read stuff like The Witching Hour, The House of Mystery. And so, and then gradually you find that your interest in sort of, the darker side of stuff, whether it's, for what is referred to as the paranormal or the occult, it's anything that's a little bit outside of the norm. And one of the things that a lot of people say about the goth scene is that really what it comes down to is that there's an aspect of the goth scene that talks to you specifically, whether it's one or many of those things that I mentioned. I mean, obviously there's a lot to do with gothic literature and gothic artwork and whatever, but really what it comes down to, the interpretation of what is and what is not goth, is a very personal one, but the glue that holds all of that together is the music. And to be fair, of course people can like what the hell they like. They can like any kind. They can like to wear this and like to wear that. But when it comes down to it, you cannot really be fully immersed within Gothic culture without accepting the music as well. I mean, quite frankly, I was involved in the scene in the 80s, and a lot of people in the goth scene then, they wouldn't know, Sheridan Le Fanu novel if it hit them on the head. They were interested in the sociological, but the actual social culture and the norms and values of the scene at that time. Mm-hmm. And so really the goth scene is many different things to many different people. It's what you mentioned early on, it's a way of life, and it is and it isn't. I mean, a lot of people think that because you're involved in the gothic scene, you live in a haunted house. Exactly. With coffin for a tea table and kind of stuff like that. Some people do live like that, or they have aspects of that, but that's all cool and that's all good. But one of the things about the Gothic scene, I mean, one of the questions you need to ask yourself, and I've asked myself many times, is why, of all cultures, has the Gothic scene been so pervasive? Why has it existed for so long? I mean, I don't know how much you know about sociological theory to do with youth groups and countercultures and subcultures. Yeah. The general understanding of these youth, inverted commas, based scenes is that they're transitory, connected to commodification, and will change dialectically over time. And I think that generally that's true, except the goth scene. The Gothic scene continues, it does change over time, it does dialectically change, it changes from one thing to another, different norms and values come into play. But basically the scene is, put it this way, if you used to teleport somebody from the 1980s who only knew the 1980s goth scene and put them in the scene today, there's lots of norms and values they may not recognise, but the general idea of what goth is, they would recognise.
Yeah, I believe so too. But would you say that over the last 2 years, I would say, or 3, there's been a kind of, it never died, as you said. Okay,
never.
Yeah, but there has been sort of a comeback from those who started in the 80s. I've interviewed.
You mean like what bands, are you referring to what I would call returners? People who've kind of were involved in the scene many years ago and then come back to the scene in the 2000s. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of theories as to why that should be. I mean, some people refer to them as the returned or the returners. And I think that really there's lots of different theories as to why that's happened. But I think the main reason is the fact that a lot of people had children in this sort of like in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. Those children have now, grown up, left home, got families of their own. And the people that were involved in the scene in the 80s or even the early 90s are now looking about. Those who went away, that is. I mean, there's a lot of us that was just there the whole time. And kind of looking around and thinking, what's happened to the Gothic, what's happened to the Gothic scene? And they come back. And then usually there's a little bit of like kind of trying to just listen to nothing but 80s music, but a lot of people are quite open-minded about what's happening now. No. I mean, I think you mentioned about, almost like a new wave of goth, really, in the sort of late, late, I don't know what you call it, 2019, the 20s, before into the 2020s, whatever they call them. I think that is correct. and I think it's to do with many factors. You could say it's to do with the return. You could say that it's to do with the availability of technology. Now, obviously, because these days technology is so pervasive that you can have a recording studio on your laptop, which will, if you've got the technical knowledge, you can record music. Yeah. This is as good as any 24 or 48 track recording studio from the 80s, and then you can release it digitally online, etc., etc. So there's this abundance of new music coming out, and plus a lot of people, I think, who were involved in the scene in the 80s and 90s are also discovering technology and releasing new material. So I think it's all a good thing, quite frankly.
Yeah. We do have a question from a viewer,
right.
And the question is as follows. Is Edgar Allan Poe considered Goth literature?
Of course. His literature was Gothic in nature. It's all of the stuff he wrote was, in a traditional sense, a traditional literary sense, Gothic. And I think that really there's no, that's it. It's a straightforward yes, really. I mean, people like Edgar Allan Poe, Sheridan Le Fanu, Bram Stoker famously, they were all, and obviously I live in Hucknall in the UK, and where I'm talking to you now, I am no more than 500 yards away from the grave of Lord Byron, the great romantic poet. And obviously, you'll know the story about Percy Bysshe Shelley, Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, and Lord Byron, and how they hatched a plan one crazy drunken night in Italy to write the most Gothic novel ever. And obviously, they all had a quick go, and I can't remember off the top of my head what the other two novels were, but Mary wrote Frankenstein. So so I think that really that is, I think that this brings back another reason why I think the Gothic scene will always exist in one form or other, is because people, to a greater or lesser extent, are always attracted to the concept of otherworldliness and, to use an awful cliche, the dark side, which of course was Edgar Allan Poe and all the authors I mentioned, and many others as well.
Okay, thank you.
Is that good?
Yeah, thank you so much.
No problem.
Our 10 minutes are 12 minutes, but okay, no problem with that. And I hope we can do this again in the future with other aspects related to Goth and have some more thoughts. Okay, I would just let everyone know that next week we will have Sometime the Wolf launched a very, very nice album.
Very good band.
Trevor? Yeah?
Yeah, very good band, yeah.
And the album Earthquake is amazing. So I hope you will tune in next week for a brief chat with Drew Freeman from Sometime the Wolf. Okay, that's it for today. See you tomorrow in You Never Know with Crow and Alexa. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much and good night.
Hi, Trevor.